As Family Guy has evolved, Brian has become increasingly focused on finding love, though his track record is abysmal. In fact, he might be one of the most unstable partners on the show. Today, we're breaking down Brian Griffin's depressing love life. Where do his romantic struggles begin? His obsession with love first surfaced in Season 2, Episode 4, Brian in Love. A wedding mishap led him to therapy, where it was revealed he had feelings for Lois. By the episode's end, Brian confessed but accepted staying friends, setting the precedent that he handled rejection with some grace, at least early on. Brian's next romantic encounter came in Season 3 with Pearl, a reclusive woman he met while serving community service. Initially abrasive and insufferable, she won Brian over when he discovered her singing talent. Encouraging her to leave her home, Brian helped her embrace life, only for Pearl to immediately get hit by a car. In her final moments, he used virtual reality to give her a peaceful farewell, ensuring she didn't die feeling alone. Once again, Brian was a romantic, but left heartbroken. His next relationship didn't paint him in the best light. Season 4 saw Brian competing on The Bachelorette. Mostly indifferent until he fell for Brooke. Again, their bond formed through music, and Brian saw her as genuine, not just chasing fame. But when Brooke rejected him, Brian didn't take it well. Instead of accepting it, he stalked her, filling her answering machine and playing music in her yard despite her police threats. His behavior worsened in Season 5 with Jillian, a beautiful but unintelligent woman. Brian felt ashamed of dating her, contradicting his usual claim that he wanted an intelligent partner. Brian kept his relationship with Jillian hidden, but it eventually blew up in his face. This season also saw Meg become infatuated with him. Though still dating Jillian, Brian ended up taking Meg to a dance after she couldn't get a date. While he tried rejecting her multiple times, he initiated the problem by drunkenly making out with her. To his credit, he tried to handle it, even seeking Lois's help, but was ultimately kidnapped by Meg. In Season 6, Episode 2, Jillian, pushed by Peter, gave Brian an ultimatum: move in or move on. Though Brian had no interest in a serious relationship, he agreed out of spite toward Lois, trying to prove he wasn't shallow. This backfired horribly. Brian lashed out, admitting he couldn't afford his share of the expenses and never wanted to move in at all. By this point, Brian had lost his early charm. No longer the lovable, heartbroken romantic, he was now a hypocritical, self-absorbed mess, yet still in denial about his own shortcomings. Jillian ultimately ended things with Brian, leaving him single once again, a relief given his deception. His selfishness had already been obvious, as he stood by while Jillian struggled with an eating disorder, caring more about her looks than her well-being. Things only got worse in Season 6, Episode 10, when Brian once again fixated on Lois. Unlike his previous infatuation, this time he was more aggressive and underhanded. He flirted openly, even in front of an oblivious Peter, and when Lois mentioned feeling tipsy, Brian lunged at her. Though he later felt conflicted, he still lashed out at Peter, claiming he was a bad husband. Though Brian and Lois made amends, this storyline cemented his scummy behavior. His next two relationships only highlighted his worsening flaws. With Tracy, the mother of his son Dylan, he callously responded to her past trauma by asking if she had gone all the way. Then in Season 7, Brian dated Carolyn, but instead of respecting her romantic signals, he ignored them completely. While trying to appear chivalrous, he refused to communicate, ultimately sabotaging the relationship himself. As if sabotaging one relationship wasn't enough, Brian tried to break up Carolyn and Cleveland just to get her back. Then, in Season 7, Episode 14, Brian found himself caught between two women. Learning that Jillian was getting married sent him into a jealous spiral, leading him to drown his sorrows in alcohol and hook up with Lauren Conrad. Brian immediately resented Lauren when she proved to be more intelligent than him, revealing that, despite his claims, he couldn't handle dating someone smarter. Lauren dismissed his bitterness, insisting it stemmed from his unresolved love for Jillian. While Brian did admit to still loving her, it was hard to take seriously. He never truly valued Jillian, so his grand declaration at her wedding felt hollow, more about his ego than genuine love. Brian's next two flings, with Rita and Ida, were just as short-lived. He only ended up with Rita after her daughter ditched their date, and when people mocked her age, he cheated on her instead of owning the relationship. Even worse, he justified his infidelity, claiming it was a lesson learned. With Ida, Brian chased instant gratification, riding the confidence boost from a conference. Then, in Season 9, Episode 14, Teagues for Two, Brian spiraled again. He pursued Denise, but when she rejected him, he turned to Quagmire for advice, only to repel her even more. Seeking revenge, Brian tracked down Glenn's ex, Cheryl Teagues, just to flaunt their relationship. Quagmire retaliated, arriving at a date with Jillian, successfully making Brian jealous. Over time, Brian completely lost the romantic depth he once had. His early attempts at love were unfulfilling due to shallow connections, yet he kept repeating the same mistakes. Brian's next relationships further exposed his obsession with sex over real connection. In The Blind Side, he lied about not being a dog just to be with Kate, only refraining from sleeping with her to keep up the ruse. When they parted, he claimed to care deeply, but if that were true, he wouldn't have deceived her so easily. In This Little Piggy, Brian and Stewie competed for the same woman at a music festival. Though Brian pretended to care, Stewie quickly realized he hadn't even bothered learning about her. Then, in Season 14, Brian met Tori at a car wash and hatched a new scheme, posing as her newly adopted dog to carry on an affair while her husband was away. These encounters solidified Brian's pattern of deception, showing that his relationships were built on lies rather than love. In Scammed Yankees, Brian sank even lower, attempting to groom Meg's friend Patty and trick her into sleeping with him. In The Heartbreak Dog, he began to resemble his earlier self, developing feelings for Bonnie. While still underhanded and secretive, this mirrored his original crush on Lois, falling for the wife of a close friend. Bonnie, feeling trapped in her marriage, saw Brian as independent and low maintenance, someone who could give her attention without demands. By Season 14's finale, Brian was on another doomed quest for love, falling for Padma, a tech support operator he had only spoken to over the phone. Convinced she was the one, he traveled to India, believing he could win her hand with a dowry. In a desperate attempt, Brian embarrassed himself on national television, proving yet again that his love life was driven more by fantasy than genuine connection. Brian's pursuit of Padma ended in failure, as he lost both the game show and her respect after revealing his ignorance of her culture. A similar theme arose in Boy Meets Girl, where Brian, believing he was saving Ellie, entered a dog show to prevent her from forced breeding, only to fail when it mattered most. Season 17's first 2 episodes introduced Jess, a woman with a terminal illness and a bucket list of sexual experiences. Brian slept with her and, driven by his need to play the hero, proposed so she could experience marriage before she died. Initially, this seemed noble, but when Jess survived, their relationship quickly soured. Brian became bitter and cruel, showcasing his passive-aggressive, spiteful nature. Their resentment escalated, culminating in Brian attempting to burn down their apartment, proving once again how toxic he could be in relationships. Following his failures, Brian focused on himself for the rest of Season 17, first in Com RS, where he schemed wealthy widows, and then in Bree Robot, where he literally fell for himself. His first real shot at redemption came in Brita, Season 18, Episode 2, where he rekindled things with Ida. Unlike their previous one-night stand, Brian suggested a real relationship, though he initially hid her out of embarrassment. Eventually, he embraced their romance, showing genuine commitment, but Quagmire's resentment ruined any chance they had. Season 19 saw Brian bonding with Holly's young son, though Holly soon left him for her ex, making this arc more about lost fatherhood than romance. His latest relationship was far less meaningful, as he slept with Zlata, Stewie's mail-order bride, after she flattered his writing. Beyond these major arcs, Brian's countless shallow flings highlight his selfish, short-sighted approach to love. Once romantic and vulnerable, he has devolved into a jaded, superficial figure. What do you think was Brian's most depressing relationship? Let us know in the comments.